Well, welcome everybody to, we got some background. Somebody got their, is somebody in Teams or rather than in the chat in the room?
So it felt.
Oh, it's Sandra, okay. Right, so anyway, start again. So welcome to the Planning Committee meeting on the 6th of December 22. Can I remind everybody online to keep their cameras on so that they can vote, and to use the hands up in the chat, please, because it makes it a lot easier for me if I'm not looking across at the other screen all the time. I ask members just to stay at the end after recording's finished. I just want to have a quick word, so if you could do that, please. So we'll get on with the meeting. Ask officers to introduce themselves first. Craig, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. My name's Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning here in Monmouthshire County Council.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Team Manager.
Joanne Chase, Solicitor to the Planning Committee today.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor.
Good afternoon, members. This is Mark Davis, Highway and Development Manager for Monmouthshire.
Faye?
Yeah, Phil Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Sorry, Faye, I thought your microphone was on, but it's not. And I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, the Chair of the committee. Dale?
Hello all, I'm Councillor Dale Rook, I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Okay, thanks very much. And I see there's a message that Steve Garrick is having difficulties. Are you all right now, Steve, or not? And Jill, you're okay now?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, everybody. So, getting on to the agenda. Wendy, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yeah, from Councillor Anne Webb.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. I have to declare personal interest in respect of the application on the Willows. There is a reference within the viability report to a company that my son is the contracts manager for. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get the contract subsequently, but just in case they do, I'm declaring an interest. Can we then move on to the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting? Has anybody got any points that they wish to raise on that, please? Faye?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I've just got a few points. Let me just get the minutes up. So my first point was that I made a request on condition 10 with Llandegfed Reservoir regarding the light spillage to be investigated. I was wondering if that had been done. The second point that I've got is on item number 6, which is the first application for Llandegfed. A vote's recorded correctly because it totals up to 13 on that one, whereas all the others total up to 14. So I just wanted to check that. And then on item number 6 again, when Graham Rogers spoke, bullet point 4 of his contribution, it states Julie James, the MS for Climate Change, who proposes. No, I don't think it should say proposes, because he was referring to the ministerial statement, which isn't actually a proposal. And secondly, where it says the proposals will not enhance the SSSI, I believe that that should read the applications will not enhance and will further damage the SSSI. And lastly, also on item number 6 on page 7, it says that we resolved the application DM to 2020-00762 but that should be the application number DM 2020-00317, and that was it for the minutes from me.
Okay, thanks for that. Does anybody want to raise any comment on that there? No? Okay, the points noted then, Faith. Thanks very much. We'll research that. And can I repeat to everybody, please put your hands up in the chat, because I might not notice you on my screen. Wendy, can you put a hands up function? Okay, thanks for that. We move on to the applications now. The first point I want to raise is with regards to the application on Tithe House, which is DM 2022-00484. Got a statement here from Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning.
Thank you, Chair. This application, I think members have been aware, there's been a number of correspondence come in over the weekend from a lot of concern from local residents about the openness and the transparency of the planning department with regards to this application, and I think we need to ensure that all concerns that have been raised, and there's been a lot of late correspondence over the weekend that has come into the planning department, all that needs to be referred to and reviewed and considered before we present this planning application to members, so that as officers we are presenting you with the accurate information. So I just want to give officers time and the opportunity to do that in light of the concerns that have been raised. So I think the Chair has agreed that we defer this application for today. We do that for a review and appraisal of the correspondence that has come in, and then hopefully present it back to members at the next convenient planning committee.
Okay, thank you, Craig. So we'll move on now to the rest of the agenda, and the first one we'll look at is DM 2018/01995. As you can see from 2018, this has been about a long time for various reasons. I stress that this is an outline application with all matters reserved, well, pretty well all matters reserved, rather than the primary access off Barron Street. If anybody's got any questions on the access, Mark Davis from Highways is on the call. So I think, Andrew, you're presenting that.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members here in County Hall and anyone watching online. So as you've correctly said, this is an outline application with only access considered at this stage, and it is for 6 new dwellings in the town of Usk. And just to confirm, the reason for it being presented to Planning Committee is that it has exceeded the threshold of at least 5 objections from different households. So I'll firstly take you through the slides, just particularly for the benefit of any members that weren't able to join us on site. So this is the application site edged in red, as you can see on screen. The blue line boundary simply indicates any other land that's within the ownership of the applicant. So you can see there the site is accessed off the bottom of Barron Street in Usk. So this plan here, apologies if the resolution is a little poor, it just shows the existing levels on the site. So this here is an indicative layout, and I'll stress that the word indicative, as that would form part of a subsequent reserve matters. So this is merely intended to show how potentially the provision of 6 dwellings and associated parking, etc., could be provided on site. But you will note there also reference to the dimensions and scale parameters which are fixed at this outline stage, and particularly the reference to the maximum height that I'll come back to later. So this aerial shot here shows the buildings to be demolished. They are sort of greenhouses in association with the Willows Garden Centre business operation, so these would be demolished to make way for the new dwellings. That's just some views there showing those in situ, and again other buildings that would be lost to facilitate the development. This is an area of land just slightly to the south of the application site, an area of hard standing that is literally to the south of the site. This is taken looking back. You can see there the sort of entrance from the bottom end of Barron Street in the far distance, with the buildings there on the right hand side. Again, those would be lost, as would these greenhouses. And this is taken almost at the site access point just outside, looking back up towards Barron Street. So, in terms of the issues and evaluation of this outline application, the officer's report, as you'll have seen, provides a very detailed assessment of the material planning issues and relevant planning policy. So instead, rather than repeating those, I'll focus really on the key planning issues. And starting principally with the principle of the site, which measures approximately 0.32 hectares. It is within the Usk Town development boundary. It's also within the Usk conservation area. And it's owing to this location within the conservation area and some surrounding heritage assets that, following consultation with the council's heritage team, you'll have noted then on the slide earlier that the maximum dwelling height has been restricted to 8.2 metres. So this has been brought down through negotiation with officers, and that would be managed via appropriate planning condition. In the realms of that, in terms of negotiation and amendments, the scheme was originally seeking permission for 7 dwellings, but this has now been reduced to 6, with additional space that was required to provide flood storage. However, in accordance with policy H1, residential development within main towns, such as Usk, is permitted subject to detailed planning considerations. And the first of those that I'll discuss is flooding. The application itself proposes highly vulnerable development, in this case residential dwellings, and NRW's flood risk map confirms that the sites within the C1 of the Development Advice Map, or DAM, contained in Technical Advice Note 15, and the 1%, that's 1 in 100 year, and 0.1%, 1 in 1,000 year, annual probability fluvial flood that outlines of the River Usk. So the officer's report provides a full assessment of the TAN 15 justification tests. However, I would note that reference should actually be made to PPW 11 in the report and not PPW 10. But of relevance here is the reference to previously developed land. And this point is picked up in the late correspondence submitted by the Civic Society, who are of the view that the Willows contains agricultural buildings and therefore fails to meet the definition of previously developed land that's specifically defined within PPW 11. However, the site use is that of a garden centre, which is an A1 use, not agriculture. And therefore, in terms of the definition, officers are satisfied. I mean, there are some instances where garden centres are a sui generis use, but officers are satisfied that it's not agricultural land, and therefore it does accord with the definition of previously developed land. The Civic Society also note that the development would be contrary to the LDP strategy to direct vulnerable development away from areas of flood risk. There's policies here in the LDP in terms of policy SD3, but even within that, the supporting text of this policy does highlight the need to have overriding regard to TAN 15. And in this case, a detailed flood consequence assessment, and I'll refer to that as an FCA from here on, has been provided, and the findings of which accepted by Natural Resources Wales, NRW. And officers therefore maintain the view that the development would not be contrary to the aims of either Strategic Policy S12 or Development Management Policy SD3. In terms of third-party flood risk associated with this development, a flood conveyancing route using lower level alongside the development, which is in land owned by the developer, which is predicted through the FCA to improve flood conveyance locally and reduce the risk of flooding to the area around the periphery of the site to the north. Part of the considerations and conclusions of the FCA is that it's proposed to raise the ground level of the development between 16.3 to 16.55 metres AOD and the finished floor level to between 16.6 to 16.8 metres AOD. And officers are satisfied that, having regard to the advice of NRW, that this would not result in an unacceptable risk to flooding to surrounding residential properties. It's noted that a condition to manage this is not in the schedule of conditions within the officer's report, and so if members are minded to approve the application, it's requested that on this basis that an additional condition is included requiring these changes to levels. Separate SAB, sustainable drainage consent would be required for the development of the site, and infiltration information has been provided to the satisfaction of the SAB officer who is content that the matter can be managed through that SAB application process. You'll have seen also, members, in some of the late correspondence, some local concerns expressed by Councillor Keir and the Civic Society, noting flooding events that was part of Storm Dennis in February 2020. They state that there is more regular flooding occurring downstream of Mill Street and backing up into the Usk, as well as the proposed development site as a whole via the Allway Brook, and that there's an inability of it to flow through the designed outlet valve when it becomes shut due to the levels of the main River Usk. As officers, it's noted that the final FCA was submitted after this event, and that the FCA that was undertaken by JBA Consultancy was subject to almost 2 years of dialogue with NRW. And officers are therefore satisfied that the issue of flooding has been thoroughly considered by NRW and accept their advice as statutory consultee in respect of flood risk. However, it is noted that the FCA recommends that a flood action plan should be developed and adopted to secure safe and timely evacuation during flood events. And this would include an evacuation route to the upper floors of all dwellings remaining operational under all conditions. And therefore, if members are minded to approve, I would recommend that an additional condition be attached requiring that a flood action plan be submitted alongside subsequent reserve matters applications. Turning to planning obligations, it is planning policy that in main towns and rural secondary settlements, as identified in policy S1 of the LDP, that have a capacity for 5 or more dwellings will make a 35% provision of the total number of dwellings on the site to be affordable. However, this is subject to appropriate viability assessment, which is set out in the policy. And in this instance, a viability appraisal has been submitted by the applicant that has been independently assessed by the district valuer. The review by the DV considered 2 scenarios, one with both Section 106 contributions, and these would be for highway and transportation improvements and green space connectivity, as well as the provision of on-site units, and the other scenario was simply for the provision of the on-site units. In both events, the considered conclusion of the DVS valuer was that the scheme is unable to support either scenario. Accordingly, having regard to the independent DV valuer office's position, officers accept that no planning applications by way of Section 106 agreement are to be secured as part of this application. Turning to highways and access, as noted at the outset, the issue of access is considered as part of this outline application. The proposed access point would be off Barron Street, and this would be designed to be to adoptable standards that would include a 5.5 metre carriageway and 2 metre wide footpaths either side. The internal road layout, however, would be subject to the layout reserve matter. However, the indicative layout does show that the site can accommodate the appropriate level of off-street parking to serve each of the new dwellings. The proposal includes a localised widening of Barron Street to enable vehicles to pass one another. This would require the applicant to enter into a legal agreement with the Council's Highways Department. However, it's worth noting that the Highways engineer has advised that the means of access and the widening works along Barron Street are acceptable. A construction traffic management plan is to be conditioned that would enable measures to be put in place during the building works to ensure any impact on neighbouring properties would be mitigated. Therefore, on balance, the proposed development is not considered to generate an unacceptable increase in vehicular traffic movement. It's within the town development boundary for Usk and within walking and cycling distance to the amenities that the town offers. So subject to the separate need for a Section 278 agreement with highways and the aforementioned planning conditions, the development is considered to accord with the adopted policy MV1. With regards to phosphates, under the Habitat Regulations Assessment process, the local authority has undertaken an appropriate assessment in respect of the impact on the River Usk Special Area of Conservation. And owing to the unique circumstances of the site and its land use, and therefore the employment of fertilisers in association with the garden centre, it has been shown that the development can achieve betterment or neutrality. NRW have been consulted on the findings of the appropriate assessment and have confirmed their agreement that there will be no adverse effect on the integrity of the River Usk SAC. So, in conclusion, the application, as the Chair set out, has been in for quite some time, has been subject to very detailed consideration by officers, our statutory consultees, including Natural Resources Wales, and as stated, the matter of viability has been discussed and fully and independently assessed by the district valuer. So, subject to the conditions set out in your officer's report, as well as the 2 additional conditions, one for the levels to be achieved and the second for a flood action plan, the application is presenting members this afternoon with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And so go to Councillor Howells next as local member. Just bear in mind that there are 2 further recommendations that I think principally deal with a lot of the comments that were raised on site yesterday. But over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. The committee visited the site yesterday and could see for themselves the poor state of the glass houses, probably past their best served purpose, and will soon require some work either to renovate or demolish them. I'm pleased to report from a conversation with the owner of the Willows Garden Centre that they would welcome the new development, as this will see an improvement to the access road to their business. That there will be no adverse effect to their business and they will be able to carry on as normal. I know there have been many concerns from nearby residents and a petition was raised when the application was first proposed. Some residents have contacted me and my fellow councillor Tony Keir directly. Their concerns mainly around the increased traffic expected and the new development and flooding. Barron Street is a very narrow stretch of single road with equally narrow pavements. The road serves Manor Court Retirement Complex, which has 28 homes. I'm also told that the cottages on this road have no foundations and have suffered cracks during constructions on previous sites in this area. I'd like to hear some assurances that, and I have just now actually, that there will be some restrictions on the types of delivery vehicles and a full management plan put in place at the construction phase, and if measures will be put in place when these vehicles deliver at the access point of Barron Street to ensure the safety of the residents and pedestrians. I know, along with Councillor Keir, that there are real concerns from residents on Mill Street for the increased risk to homes from flooding. The office report, as we've seen, takes into account the potential flooding from the River Usk, but does not really show the potential from the flooding from the River Alway. This is a tributary river to the Usk, as we've just heard. When the Usk floods, the gate automatically closes and the Alway has nowhere to go but to go onto the fields. This then has a knock-on effect going onto the mill ditch, which then floods backwards from the cricket ground, and this is a regular occurrence, really. I would like to see some reference made to, in a report for the potential for flooding in this area and how it would come back up to the development. Some of my concerns are about phosphorus, and I see that the report shows that this has been offset. I'd like to know, is the garden centre still producing the same level of phosphates after the build? And is this report still applicable, because it was done in October 2021? I know there's been work in the treatment plant down there. And also the foul water, is this still applicable, that the Craig Allway treatment works will accommodate the extra 6 properties? I will follow today. It's quite a difficult one. I'll follow. We all know we need extra housing in the air in Monmouthshire, so I will be following this conversation very closely before forming my decision on whether to approve or decline this application. Thank you. I don't know if this is appropriate now. Would you like me to read out Tony's email or Councillor Keir's email?
You can do. I think you're still within your 4 minutes. You can use the 2 minutes summing up time if you wish as well.
Okay. I'm sure fellow councillors have seen the email from Councillor Keir, but I'll read it out to you as well, and very much similar views. I'm cognizant of the considerable local objections also from residents in and around Barron Street and Mill Street, as detailed on the planning portal and direct to me. I note Kate's report in response to the objection points raised to the extent that approval with conditions is recommended. My main and considerable concerns surround the flooding aspect. The report clearly indicates the possibility of future flooding of the development and surrounding properties. It is accepted that flooding via the River Usk, akin to 1979, after the failure of the flood prevention bank at the Conager, as well as the Abergavenny Road, both upstream of the main Usk River Bridge, would be catastrophic for major parts of Usk and not just the proposed development. The report, however, does not, it appears to me, fully address the more regular occurring flooding downstream of Mill Street and backing up into Usk, as well as the proposed development site as a whole, via the Allway Brook and the inability of it to flow through the designed outlet valve when it becomes shut due to the levels of the main River Usk. I cannot dismiss the flood of the 16th of February 2020, when the Willows was flooded as per the attached pictures, and I don't know if Councillor saw the pictures that Councillor Keir had sent. There were discussions today around the sloping away topography at the Willows, and the development would not affect the floodplain. To the best of my research on the planning portal, I'm not able to see such important relevant details on it, nor is there sufficient comment within Kate's report to satisfy me of entirely reasonable objections raised relating to the flooding aspect. The report, in my view, should include that this specific back flood risk has been fully considered and assessed. At this stage, therefore, I personally cannot conclude that TAN 15 has been met. Overall, I wish to see this evidence before I can add my approval to the scheme, which otherwise I have no objection to, subject to strict conditions on site, vehicle movement, pedestrian safety at the entrance to Barron Street. That's regards, Tony.
Thank you, Councillor Hells. Andrew, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah. Apologies, microphone. Yeah, there's a few different points there, so thank you to Councillor Howells and obviously Councillor Keir, who can't be with us today.
Councillor Keir is online watching. So.
Oh, right. Apologies. In terms of, I'll just go through them as I've noted and as you've discussed there. So in terms of the increase in traffic, obviously, yes, there would be a traffic management plan in place during the course of the works. But as I said, longer term, in terms of the provision of 6 units, you know, as officers and indeed our colleagues in highways do not consider that to be putting an acceptable increase in terms of volume of traffic on that highway network. It was mentioned then in terms of, unless I've misunderstood the point, in terms of construction and some of the structural issues with some of the older neighbouring properties. I mean, those sort of matters would be outside of our remit, I'm afraid, in terms of imposing conditions. in terms of the flooding and the issues from the Allway that have been discussed, and obviously we've seen the photographs taken from some Storm Dennis just over 2 years ago. I think, as stated, obviously the flood consequence assessment was put together, and the modelling that was included was done, in line with NRW. They are our statutory consultee on the flooding matter. They have looked at the modelling that's been done. They are the technical experts on this matter. And we've also consulted with our SAB team as well. We'll also have sort of some localised flood risk management responsibilities. But I think what we need to do is to look at the advice from our statutory consultees on the matter of flooding. There are works clearly that need to be done to ensure that the future occupiers of these dwellings, as well as surrounding neighbouring properties, are safeguarded, and that the development in itself doesn't contribute to an existing problem. And I think, as planning officers, that's why we're making the recommendation that we are, is because NRW's advice is, like I said, it was almost a 2-year process of negotiations with the applicant. They've employed, experienced JBA consultant, experienced flooding consultants to undertake this work for them. And we believe we've arrived at a solution that accords with national planning policy. And I say those conditions, I think certainly the ground levelling, rising rather, is a paramount mitigation measure, and say that the action plan that's also required, that will in part also inform then the layout in terms of the reserve matters stage, and any issues can be considered as a whole at that time. In terms of phosphates, and in terms of what would be remaining of the garden centre and their level of phosphates that they're still producing, I mean that's not known, and obviously the ongoing use of the garden centre and to what level they're producing is outside the remit of this planning application. But in terms of foul water, then yes, this is shown on the layout plan. This is proposed to connect to Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water's assets, and they've confirmed that there's capacity for it. So I hope I've covered all the points, but obviously if there's anything else, I'll come back and respond accordingly. But I hope and trust I've covered the points you made.
Okay, going to the raised hands now, Councillor Bromfield.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Keir has got his hand up. I don't know if you want him to go first as a ward member, or do you want me to go first?
If you're giving way to Councillor Keir, briefly, Tony, was there something you needed to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Couple of things. First of all, I'll just declare an interest. I'm chairman of Usk Civic Society, but the submission is made by the secretary, who has delegated power as chair of the planning subcommittee. So that late entry yesterday I wasn't aware of, but they do have delegated power. I just wanted to emphasise, I thank first of all the officers for the detailed report and answers to some of the questions. The point I was referring to, the flooding, was not necessarily to the development site itself being raised, but the result of the raising of that land and the potential effect it might have on the residents close by. The other point I was trying to get across was that I believe that the concerns of the residents are genuine because of what we saw in Flood Dennis, and I think that the report presented should detail specifically that point and that risk. And I hear the comments that have been made today, but in identifying that risk and stating it, that the mitigations in recommending the planning, they should be noted as well, so that the residents, when they come back to myself and Councillor Howells, we would be able to refer them to that report, and specifically to the points that the officers and the planning committee have considered and discussed to alleviate the concerns. I don't think it's, personally, my opinion, that the assumption that it has been considered over the last 2 years, because the discussing period, covered Storm Dennis. My opinion is that particular point should be specifically made within the report, and that risk is covered off to the satisfaction of everybody, and that we can refer to the residents rather than assumptions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Keir. Andrew, was there any points, or Craig, that you wanted to pick up on there before I move on?
Yeah, in terms of the first point, and yeah, in terms of the result of raising the land and the effect then, the knock-on effect of that, yeah, I mean, that is one of the mitigations and recommendations of the report, and I think indeed the officer's report does discuss the impact of flooding and where there is smaller impacts of that ground raising. It's on non-residential land within the applicant's own ownership. So I think to that point, we're satisfied that by mitigating the flooding impacts for the future occupiers, we're not prejudicing the neighbouring properties that surround the development site. In terms of Councillor Keir's point, and that there should be specific reference to the events and fallout from Storm Dennis. Yeah, obviously that event occurred prior to the final FCA being completed. There isn't specific reference to it in there. I can't sort of comment further on that, but all I would is repeat the advice of the findings of it and the views expressed on the risk of flood and the risk of allowing this development, and what additional, obviously, the area that floods. This was the issue, is the additional risk created by allowing this development, and NRW's advice to us is clear on that. Yeah, I appreciate that event isn't specifically referenced, but that is the advice we've received. And as officers, we accept that it has been properly assessed.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Right, Councillor Bromfield.
Thank you. Firstly, with this one, I just wondered, in the replacement local development plan, in tier 3 and 4, which says it's going to go into the deposit plan, there's 504 rural settlements. Will this come off of that number in the RLDP? And also, I too have concerns in regards to flooding. Obviously, we saw the photos of Storm Dennis, and I know these events don't happen all the time, but we are warned that our winters are going to get milder and wetter, and we're going to have more frequent storms. And once the houses are built, then it's a little too late to be looking back and thinking, oh, we should have done that. So, I just wonder if it would be a sensible approach to actually see a flood action plan before any construction is started. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to store these up?
What I'll do, I'll just come back. There's a couple of key points there. One, I'll in terms of the replacement LDP, I'll pass to Craig as head of service. But in terms of Councillor Bromfield's point there, in terms of the flood action plan, yeah, what we would be suggesting in terms of that additional condition is that the action plan is submitted with the reserve matters, so it should inform the layout as a whole and wouldn't be a subsequent condition. So it should be in place and agreed, subject to consultation with our flood team, NRW, and that action plan informs the layout and is, to quote, is agreed before any development takes place, if that answers the councillor's query. But I'll pass to Craig to pick up the point about the LDP.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks, Councillor Bromfield, for the question about the LDP. Yes, any planning consents that we give as a council moving forward will go into the calculations with regards to what is predicted in terms of future growth as part of the replacement local development plan. So this will be considered as a windfall development, so it will go in as part of that calculation. So it will come off that figure ultimately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Craig, everybody's been very good up to now, but can I just remind everybody that this is an outline application, and an awful lot of these points will be brought up in the reserve matters. So that's just to keep it in mind. I don't want to stifle debate, but just to keep it in mind. So, Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. Some of it's been dealt with, but I do support Councillor Bromfield about the flooding, because I saw the pictures, and whatever you do, if you raise some houses up, obviously the water that was going to be there will go towards the houses that are already there. And I've got a very simple mind, but water will find its level. And I do want to be reassured that everything will be done to alleviate this before any building takes place, because it's, it is a worry, and we know that flooding is going to get worse as the years get on. Thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully that will be taken care of by the additional condition, won't it? Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Well, I was brought up in and around the Usk area before they put the flood defences up, so I'm fully aware of the flooding issues on this particular area. My question really is that in the south of the county with NRW, they apply a 1 in 1,000 year flood risk on land which is close to the sea line, really. Does the 1 in 1,000 year flood risk apply? I'll ask the officer this. Does this 1 in 1,000 year flood risk apply to river sources? It is a main river under NRW, and it is prone to quick flooding and quick release of water. Does that apply on a main river? Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Andrew or Craig?
We're just going to go through the documentation. I think it's 1 in 100, Tony, rather than 1 in 1,000. But in terms of this concern with regards to flooding, and Councillor Powell was raising it then with regards to flooding. One of the key tests of Technical Advice Note 15 is that there isn't any third-party flooding to other parties. So Natural Resources Wales would have looked at this, and if they did have any concerns with regards to whether this would have any flooding, they would certainly object and raise that concern. They are our technical advisors with regards to flooding. We rely on them to give us that advice, and obviously as members you can see that they haven't objected to this development, and flooding elsewhere is a key characteristic of Technical Advice Note 15. So that's the only sort of, well, the reassurance I give you really is that they would have looked at it, and I can assure you that Natural Resources Wales, if they had any concerns, they would be raising it.
Okay, but there's an outline plan application.
Yeah, as you say. Okay, thank you for that, Tony, and thank you for that, Craig. Nobody else? Oh, yeah, Councillor Byrne.
Hi. Thank you very much. I was wondering if we were able to put as a condition that there was an increase in biodiversity on site, so an increase of planting, in order to help water not even fail to even get to the surface and improve drainage. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a simple one to pick up on. Obviously, landscaping is a reserve matter, so we'd expect a detailed soft landscaping scheme, obviously a requirement as well for biodiversity enhancements as per PPW 11, and believe that is also condition 6 in the office report, is that a specific scheme for biodiversity enhancements is provided with the reserves matters. So it's a sort of double-edged prong really, not only a suitable soft landscaping of native species, but also a specific requirement to fulfil the PPW 11 enhancements. So that element certainly would be borne out in the reserve matter stage.
Okay, thanks for that. And Councillor Bond.
Hello, thanks, Chair. Talking to the owner yesterday, there was some discussion about whether the demolition and use of materials could be disposed of sustainably, and he was saying that he would be advertising on eBay anyone to the glass. But I wonder if I guess that's nothing we can't encourage the sustainable demolition and getting rid of the materials.
Yeah, I think we can certainly add what we would call an informative or an advice note to the planning permission that is, even some guidance on that is encouraged. In terms of it being a specific planning condition and how they sort of responsibly dispose of the resultant building material, there isn't really a planning policy to hang that off, and certainly in the absence of that, I'd be very concerned that any such condition would meet the condition circular in terms of reasonable and related to the development. I think that'd be difficult, but certainly people should recycle building materials responsibly, and I think an advice note on the consent would reinforce that measure, but that's probably about as far as we could act on that point.
I thought so, thank you. That would be good though, thank you.
Okay, thanks to Councillor Bond. As I've declared an interest, I think I can add a little bit there. It is standard within the demolition industry to make sure that everything is responsibly recycled where it can be. So you can rely on the industry, whoever gets the contract. Right, I've got nobody else with their hands up, not on the screen either. So we have a recommendation. It actually says approved, which is a little bit presumptuous, but nevertheless, it was a typo. Andrew, do you want to come back in?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just to confirm, in terms of that recommendation, it would be, as per the presentation, with those two additional conditions, one for the ground levels and floor levels, and also for the flood action plan to be submitted with subsequent reserve matters. Just so members are clear, if they're voting on that proposal, what they're voting on, it's not just approve, it's with those two extra conditions.
And yes, Councillor Howells, so I was just going to say, before we go to a vote, did you want to sum up?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just to clarify on that, what we're voting for. So, will you confirm with NRW that the Olway Brook has been looked at from a flooding point of view? I welcome the fact that there is a construction traffic management plan there being put in place, so that'll be something to tell the residents as well. That's about it, really. That's all. I just wanted a confirmation that we'll have from NRW that area has been looked at from the potential. It's everyone locally knows about the risk of flooding in that area, but I don't know if it's a general knowledge. So I would like confirmation from NRW that they did look specifically at that area.
Well, when it comes back for reserve matters, all of that can be tidied up then, can't it? So what we're actually voting on now is the principle of development there in an outline application, subject to those two additional conditions that Andrew has mentioned. So, as I say, we have a recommendation for approval. Can somebody propose approval, please? Councillor Butler, thank you. Craig?
So I just want to come on a point of clarification there, really, in terms of the Olway. The application is presented with NRW not objecting in regards to flooding. They would have looked at the modelling and reviewed the information in front of them. I think, well, officers and what's being considered by members today is whether that's acceptable or not. I think there was a reference there to the reserve matters. If members grant this planning consent, we are granting planning consent. The reserve matters will deal with the layout, scale, massing, and landscaping. It won't deal with the principle of development. So if members, accept Natural Resources Wales in terms of the no objection to the flooding, implications of flooding, then we are giving planning consent today. So just in terms of that clarification, we're not seeking to go back to NRW to defer on the Olway. That would have been looked at as part of their concerns and their comments, and they aren't raising any objections. So members need to consider how they when they take a vote on this development, that implications. But it will, if members are minded to approve and agree with the recommendation from officers, then the principle has been established, and then the reserve matters will just look at the scale, layout, and landscaping rather than any detailed flooding matters again.
Okay, as I gave Councillor Howells the opportunity of summing up, I see Councillor Keir's got his hand up. Briefly, Tony, did you want to just come back?
I did, Chair, on that last particular point. Councillor Howells is right to highlight that the concerns locally are the fact that, as presented, the Olway risk has not been fully identified within the report. I don't have enough confidence in NRW, frankly, to have be satisfied that this particular point has been addressed. And all I'm saying is so that we can satisfy our residents and the complaints, that I agree with what Councillor Howell says at some point, whether it's in the flood plan that we're making reference to, is that we do ask NRW, just for a simple confirmation, have you considered the flooding aspect relating to the Olway as highlighted, which happens on a regular basis, but as specifically highlighted in Storm Dennis? That's all I'm asking, so that we can go back to the residents and say, we hear what you say, we have raised this point, and we have had confirmation that it was considered within NRW's consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Officers, do you want to make a further point on that? Are you happy to deal with it in the reserve matters, or no?
Chair, I can see that members have got a bit of concern here with regards to the flooding element and the Olway in particular. Maybe as a compromise to this scenario, I mean, officers are satisfied that Natural Resources Wales aren't objecting to this particular application and would have reviewed that modelling. But if it does satisfy members and the local community and local residents in particular with regards to flooding, maybe that we ask that direct question to NRW and then we agree that with the panel in terms of agreeing that in terms of NRW have looked at it, then we just get the panel to review that and just establish that they agree that that's fine. So if members are happy with that, maybe that is a compromise that you could work with the applicant in terms of satisfying this concern.
That would be the standard way of dealing with things like that. I'm getting nods all around the room and online. Yeah, okay, so we're happy with that. So I will go to the vote now. I've had a proposal. Is somebody going to second that, please? Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Wendy, if we can have the voting function up, please. I haven't got it yet. Okay, so can we vote according to your wishes then, please? Right, well that's
been approved.
Yeah, clearly carried, subject to the additional conditions and the inquiry with NRW about the Olway coming back to panel, and if there's any concerns when it gets to panel, it'll be referred back to this committee. Okay, everybody clear on that? Okay, right, in that case then, we'll move on to Rural Cottage, which is DM 2022-00263. Is the extension and change of use of an existing garage into a dog daycare facility, change of use of a field to a dog walking paddock, and it's at Rural Cottage, Shire Newton. And this is being presented by Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse the croaky voice. It's the reason I'm not in today. I don't want to give anyone my unfortunate cold. There we go. All right. I'll try and be as brief as I can. So this is a site we looked at yesterday on site. It was very helpful to go and have a look yesterday for those members who were there. So it seeks consent to extend the existing garage, Rural Cottage, to use in accordance with the dog daycare centre and to use 2 nearby fields for exercise purposes. So, sorry, Andrew, if you could just move the slide on. So that shows the top left-hand corner where Rural Cottage is and the garage next to it, off the rural lane to the east of Shire Newton. And then if you move further east along the lane, past the animal sanctuary that we saw a few months ago, there are 2 fields, each roughly a hectare in area. So it's 2 hectares in total, where the dog walking facilities would be located. And where that sort of V of the triangle is at the top end of the site, there's a pull in there where you can park the vehicle, which I think the owner of the site would transport the dogs to the walking area in, which is safer. Bearing in mind there may be up to 6 dogs, which would be moved at one time rather than individually. So, so the application site, both cottage and the fields, are outside any defined settlement boundaries. Classed as open countryside, where there's a presumption against new development unless it's an appropriate use for that countryside location. Although the development is in a rural location, the proposed use is considered to be acceptable in these circumstances, being small scale, but also in need of larger open space with low scale physical infrastructure. And whilst the LDP policy LC1 sets out to promote the effective use of land within urban boundaries, it's considered unlikely that a site within the urban boundary would exist where the use could be able to operate without having more adverse effects on amenity. And furthermore, TAN 6 relates to development within the countryside and promotes the diversification of the rural economy. So if we could just move the slide on, Andrew, please. Yep, so that shows the parking layout that's proposed to accommodate additional parking as required, although it was fair to note that there was reasonable space already on site, and the lane is quite wide at that point, and you could actually pull in outside with actually harming any freeway through movement of traffic on the lane there. So if we just move to the next slide. That shows that the existing garage and how it would be extended, that bottom part of the floor plan there, to accommodate the requirements for the accommodation for up to 6 dogs, each dog apparently requiring 10 square meters per dog for animal welfare reasons. The extension itself, as you can see from the drawings, is not considered to result in any unacceptable visual impact or be harmful to the character of the area. The design is in keeping with the existing dwelling and garage, and due to its proximity to the dwelling and obviously being an extension of an existing building, it's not considered to look incongruous within the wider landscape. Sorry, Andrew, if you could just move it on, please. Yep, if you could just leave it on that. No buildings are proposed to be sited within the field, and the only development is the parking area access track and proposed deer fencing. All of the features proposed within the field are considered to be appropriate for this setting and are not considered to look out of place or result in any unacceptable visual impact that would cause harm. Additionally, the applicant has recently planted trees and proposes to plant hedgerows within the field, which will further reduce any visual impact caused by the development. The proposed 1.8 metre high deer fencing will be needed to ensure the safety of the dogs when they use the exercise area, and is not considered to be unacceptable in this location. Furthermore, the proposed fencing could be erected within the site without the need for planning permission under permitted development rights. So this concern is not considered sufficient to warrant the refusal. However, details of the proposed fencing and its location are required by condition. And a second condition, removing permitted development rights to erect fencing other than which we would approve is proposed control fencing in the future, given this countryside location. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has been consulted on this application and raises no objection due to the distance separating the proposed walking area and the garage extension from the closest residential dwelling, so it's not considered that it's likely to cause amenity problems. Highways have been consulted on this application, and their initial concerns have been overcome by additional information provided by the applicant. The Highway Authority is satisfied that there is sufficient parking and turning provision within the site to serve the development of this scale. And as the number of dogs is limited to a maximum of 6, with 4 being collected and taken from site by the applicant, there is little to no concern regarding the capacity of the highway network. So we'd recommend approval subject to the conditions within the report that will help manage the development to ensure it is low impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And we've got Councillor Brown online, I believe. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak in relation to this application. Highways originally objected to the application in view of the capacity of the road network and the need for a transport plan. Paragraph 6.2 of the Planning Officer report states that there will be a maximum of 6 dogs on site each day, 4 being collected and dropped off each day by the applicant, reducing the number of vehicular trips each day. The subsequent Highways report of the 13th of October 2022 recommends a maximum of 6 dogs per day rather than at any time. The Planning Officer, who I've spoken to about this, and also the applicant on site, have no objection to following the Highways recommendation and will be grateful if the Planning Committee can amend that condition. This would mean that in relation to condition 8, it would state the daycare element of the proposal hereby approved is limited to a maximum of 6 dogs per day rather than 6 dogs at any time. The conditions cover the fencing and landscaping and are of interest in relation to visual amenity, and hope that the applicant will attend to this as soon as possible with regard to the fencing and the landscaping. Comments from the public express concern about beautiful agricultural fields being turned into car parking areas and long high fencing. The rear of the other field, which was not seen by the site visit, also looks unsightly with the high level fencing and the rural background of Saint-Pierre Wood opposite. The landscape and green infrastructure report had a provisional objection to the proposed dog walking area due to insufficient information. The site and fields is located within the Wye Valley area of natural beauty, as well as open countryside. Current LDP policy LC4 Wye Valley area of natural beauty highlights that any development to the area of natural beauty must be subservient to the primary purpose to ensure and enhance the natural beauty of the area. Hence the reason why the condition on fencing and landscaping are so important. And I'm pleased to see that these are part and parcel of the conditions, and hope that the applicant is able to erect the deer fencing or the approved fencing and landscaping as soon as possible. I hope that the committee will support the change to condition 8 to be in line with the highway recommendation as proposed in the latest highway report, in order to reduce the vehicular trips along this rural highway, which is often a single lane one with only passing places. I would like to speak again prior to any vote on this matter. So one of the main things that I do want changing is condition 8, but I think possibly this was just a mistake in the report, because it doesn't conform with a mistake in the condition, sorry, because it doesn't conform with paragraph 6.2 of the actual planning officer's report, and planning officer didn't have any objection to that being changed. So I hope that the planning committee will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Phil, do you want to come back in on any of that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, an interesting point, this condition, isn't it? I've just been able to talk by the chat with the case officer, and the case officer is not concerned about changing the condition as the local member has requested. So ultimately, it's up to members of committee to see whether they want it changed. The only thing I would say, if you condition it to restrict it to up to 6 dogs per day, that doesn't allow the applicant any flexibility, say, of maybe having a dog for a morning and then dropping that back, and maybe having another dog in the afternoon, which the condition as worded in the report would allow, i.e. at any one time, up to 6 dogs at any one time. So I just ask the members to have a think about that, to see whether they think that we should be giving the applicant a little bit more flexibility, or whether per day is something that they feel strongly about, and it should be limited to reduce the number of traffic movements per day, as requested by the local member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And before I go to the people who got their hands up, I may just make a comment myself. My personal view on the number of dogs is, as per the report, I think it's far too restrictive. If a dog comes for a morning, the opportunity of filling that afternoon space is lost if we go to 6 dogs per day. And my personal opinion is I think that's unreasonable. But I'll leave it up to members to make their own mind up on that. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Phil, at home, for your report. I hope that no one takes offence to what I'm about to say now, because it isn't intended in that way. But I've noticed that with this application, and also the following application that we're going to look at in Abergavenny, that there was only 2 objections and 1 objection by the members of public, respectively. In my personal opinion, I think that we should sort of respectively be requesting or reminding members that they need to sort of strongly consider whether it's worth officers' time, members of the planning committee's time, to put these applications forward to planning committee. I think with both these applications, they could be considered very easily by the officers themselves, or indeed the delegated panel. Particularly in the light of the economic times, resources are stretched, and resources within the planning department, and not just the planning department, are stretched as well. So I think, it's just it doesn't matter what sort of political party you represent, because planning is non-political. This is purely officers' time, because it must take a very long time for officers to write these reports, and by doing so we're then sort of clogging up the system, as it were. For example, this application was registered 11 months ago. Now the applicant could have been had that built by now. They could have had it determined within the 8 weeks, and they could have had that built. They could have been making a living, and it could have been growing the economy. If this applicant is receiving dogs, that's also then allowing other people within the community to go out and work. So you're growing the economy. As well, just sort of coming on to resources, yesterday we drove from one end of the county to the other. Now that is not only officers' time, members' time, but it's also the bus drivers' time and fuel. And time and fuel costs money. Where does that money come from? It comes from the taxpayer. So please, I just a plea to members, no matter what ward you're in, to just think carefully. As I say, I hope no one takes offence to me saying that. Also, some of these things cause an undue stress to applicants, which is unnecessary. The applicant yesterday, she had genuine reason for wanting to be close to home, which obviously, we wouldn't have found out unless we had visited her. And I personally would encourage people to work from home and encourage small start-up businesses such as this within Monmouthshire. Sort of moving on more on to the application, I see no reasons to object to it. It was good to go on site yesterday. We could see the tree plantation had already taken place and the hedging at a great expense to the applicant. I acknowledge there's a point about agricultural land. It's still land, it isn't being built on, and it can easily be converted back. So I wish the applicant well with this business venture. I hope members will support it, and I propose that it is approved as per the officer's recommendation rather than changing any conditions, as Phil mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Bromfield.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just want to echo what Councillor McKenna has said. I really don't see any need for this application to be brought before committee. I'm really happy to support this application as per the officer's recommendations without changing any conditions. So I would second Councillor McKenna.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bond.
I also want to echo what's been said and totally agree it should be accepted. Thank you.
I've got nobody else with their hands up on this. I've got a recommendation for approval from Councillor McKenna. Does anybody second that? Okay, Councillor Bryn. In that case, Wendy, can we have the voting function up, please?
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Brown. You did say you wanted to sum up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the points that have been made by Councillor McKenna and other people. I mean, I think the main reason for this report going to committee was to do with the objections from the Community Council, and also the fact that the time taken for the application to actually go through was actually due to the fact that the applicant themselves didn't provide the information that was requested by the by Highways and other people, and that was the reason for the delay in the application itself. And obviously it wasn't until the very last minute, and even before any consideration of it going to planning, that I found out how they were going to deal with the transport plan that was recommended by Highways. So it was really due to the lack of information and responses to the statutory consultants that caused any delay in relation to this. And I would be grateful if you would amend the condition. You've already started voting even before I've had chance to speak. I mean, is that correct?
I think some people had pressed the voting button before you interjected, Councillor Brown, but not everybody has voted. People did stop. The recommendation for approval was made, and it was on the basis of the report as written. So I'll continue with the vote on that, and we'll see what that vote is. So can those who have not already voted vote now, please? Well, that's unanimous. So on the basis of that, we won't be looking to alter the conditions, and we'll accept the report as it is. So thank you, Councillor Brown. And we move on now to the last item before us today, other than an appeal decision, which is DM 2022-01146. It's the retention of an outbuilding in Llantilio Patholi, and that's being presented by Andrew.
Yep, thank you, Chair. And just to confirm, although that was slightly alluded to earlier by Councillor McKenna, this application is brought to you today on the basis of a reference from the local ward member, Councillor Lane. So this is a house order planning application located along Gwent Road in Tilio Patholi. You can see this application site there on screen, edged in red. And this is a retrospective application for a detached outbuilding in the rear garden area. And you can see the position of the building there at the back of the site, and obviously members that were on site yesterday have seen it in its entirety as it is retrospective. So this is the building. I mean, the floor plan there notes this as a gym. I mean, it can be used for any purpose ancillary to the dwelling, so whether it be a gym, home office, store, whatever it might be, its purpose is ancillary to the existing dwelling. So it's a UPVC style outbuilding with a little hip roof. So there are some glimpsed views in terms of considerations. There are some glimpsed views of it from Gwent Road. You can see it in the background there. That's taken within the garden. That's the building in situ. For those that weren't with us yesterday, you can see the boundary with the neighbouring property along the right-hand side. So in terms of officers' consideration of this, it's worth noting that planning permission was granted in 2019 for a more substantial outbuilding to be built here. That measured this this applicant is for 3.4 metres in height. We have previously approved an outbuilding that measures 4.7 metres, and that was a sort of solid garage construction, rendered finish, etc. So officers are satisfied that there's a far less impact in terms of any overbearing impact on neighbouring properties, much less than that previously approved. You have noted that the sides are blanked, there's no issues of neighbour overlooking, and in terms of its position within the street scene, whether you're on site or whether you know the area, there's a very much a mix of styles, a varied palette of materials in that location. And whilst there are glimpse views of this development, certainly officers are not of the view that causes harm to the wider street scene or anything like that. The standard biodiversity enhancements have been added to the scheme and be secured by condition. So for all the reasons I've discussed, as well as those in your officer's report, it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. The local member, Councillor Lane, isn't able to be with us today. He has other business he has to deal with. I did contact him regarding his reasons for presenting this or asking for this to be presented to committee, and it was to reflect the local concerns that have been expressed to him. But other than that, he didn't have anything else to add. So, Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to what's been said about time, money and environmental, as it's all traipsing around the countryside, and just been discussed by Councillor McKenna. We also discussed yesterday about with the applicant about the misunderstanding of having to reapply when not adhering to the original planning permission. Wonder if there's some sort of information that could be given. Spoke to Officer Thomas yesterday about it, whether there's some misunderstandings that if you don't apply, even if it's a reduction of size and impact of what has already been agreed, that people should realise that they need to come back for planning permission, because this has come back because of somebody's misunderstanding, possibly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bond, and I've seen Councillor Eason's message in the chat, but I do have two other people to speak. So, Councillor Bryn.
Sorry, could the officers answer, if that's possible, please, to communicate to applicants that they should not be changing or adapting the plans, even if they think it's a lesser impact, please.
Okay, I was not going to save them up to the end, but yeah, by all means, if If Phil, Andrew, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, planning permissions are very clearly conditioned. The development is to be carried out in accordance with the approved plans, and then those plans are then listed in a table beneath. So it's very clear within the decision notice that is what has been approved, what drawings have been approved, and I say a specific condition tying the two together. I think in this case, the officer's understanding is that they believe the works would fall within their permitted development rights. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. There is quite a significant amount of guidance on our website, on Welsh Government's website, in terms of what constitutes permitted development. You know, we have a pre-application service, we have a duty officer for queries on things like permitted development. And if somebody wishes to carry out work under permitted development, they can apply for a lawful development certificate to confirm then if it does, they've got it in writing. So there's plenty of avenues there and plenty of information out there. So it's unfortunate in this case that the applicant had carried out the works not realising consent was required. But back to the original point, I don't think that the decision notice, it could be much clearer really that we are approving this development should be carried out in accordance with that. So hopefully that answers the query. I don't think there's anything different that necessarily we need to be doing on that point.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject? Just wonder if it's worth going back to that applicant, because we've been on a couple of occasions where people have changed from what's been agreed, and I just wondered if that applicant might be able to give some feedback as to what might have helped that applicant understand better. It's good to get learning, isn't it, if there's been a misunderstanding. Thank you.
I think it's a good point. We'll give that some consideration, I think, Joe. So, Councillor Bryn.
Thank you, officers. I just wanted to say that as this structure is smaller than the one originally planned and is set right at the back of the property, and they were in the process of planting trees in front of it, so we'll be seeing very little from the roadside, that we just go to approve it, really. Thank you.
I'll take that as a recommendation for approval then. Councillor Bromfield.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers. Yeah, I'm not of the same mind, to be honest. You know, there was a specific application in for this. If the applicant had any doubt, surely they would have been in contact with the officer once their application was approved. From my point of view, they've just built anything they wanted without checking with anyone. So I certainly will not be supporting this, because it does set a precedent that, you know, even if you get an application approved, you can build what you want. And I don't agree with that. And I wouldn't have thought other members of this committee would either. So on that note, I would be not supporting it.
That raises all sorts of technical issues. So, Craig.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bromfield. I think we just need to express to members that you need to consider this planning application based on what's in front of you today. Any retrospective planning application, either done by mistake or intentionally, planning committee members need to review whether that development is acceptable or not, full stop, not whether it's right in terms of the process of how they got there, in terms of retrospectiveness. You're looking at the harm that development does in terms of environmental, visual, impact on neighbours, etc. So I totally appreciate what Councillor Bromfield said in terms of the process of how we get here, but when you're determining a planning application, you should be considering what is the harm of this development that's in front of you, not what the process of how we've got to there. People, you know, we're all aware that some people do it completely out of, just out of not knowledge of the planning system, that they feel it didn't need planning consent. Other people might do something outside of planning, approved plans. However, what members need to remember is that you're considering whether this development has any harm or not. So just to sort of give you that support and advice in terms of when you're making that decision, that's the way you need to review this development process.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Everybody's coming back now. Councillor Powell.
Would it be possible, when people on the bottom of any application, that there's a paragraph saying, if at any time you feel you want to alter your planning application, please do so before you go ahead? Some words to that effect, so they know that they must only do what they've been approved for or they have to reapply with a different planning, just so that people understand that you can't change your mind halfway.
Do you want to come in on that?
Certainly something we can look at and review. Councillor Powell, yes, that's something that we can look at as to whether that's easily put into play.
Yeah. It is in the guidance, so that if somebody does something and then we have to look at it retrospectively, we have to look at it in that if they'd had applied for what they've done in the first place, would we have approved it? And if the answer is yes, well then you approve it now. But that's just the way you have to think it through. Councillor Bonfield, you wanted to come back?
I didn't mean to press that, sorry.
I'm pleased about that. So I'm taking it that Councillor Bryn has recommended approval. Can I have a second to Councillor McConnell? Have we got the function up? Because I keep on forgetting to scroll down. No, we haven't. It's there now. Can we have everybody vote in, please, whichever way they wish? That's it. Happy? Yeah. Okay, that's approved. Thank you, everybody, for that. That's the last of the applications before us today, but there is an appeal decision that's been made, and Phil, you're going to deal with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very briefly, this was an appeal decision, Grove Gardens, Caldicott, I think it's just off Church Road. For members who will be familiar with that area, it's a largely open plan estate, certainly in the frontages of the plots, and the fence was erected without permission, and they applied to retain the fence, which you see on the right hand side. Andrew, if you just move, I think we've got other photos that they can see it. So it sits in front of the forecourt there. All the others are open plan. We tried to negotiate to get the fence changed and or removed. It was refused, and it went to appeal, and the inspector agreed that was incongruous, inappropriate in this location. I think we've got one more photo for you, Andrew, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that fence will have to be removed now to actually bring the area back to its original character. So that was a useful appeal decision for us, I think.
Okay, thanks. And obviously we don't have to make any decisions on that. That was just for information. So I think I'm right in saying that is the end of the business today, on the basis of that, thanks everybody for their contributions. Can members both in the chamber and online just stay with us for a minute? Councillor McKenna, was that? Oh, sorry, it's Councillor Bond, is it? There's a message just come up on the corner of my screen.
It was just completed. Sorry, Chair. I was just completing what I'd said. If there was something on the form, then it would confirm that people have seen the requirement. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're
confirming what Councillor said.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that with officers and see if we can put some clarity in that. Wendy is. Stop.